Welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Tonight's guest has written a book that provokes readers to ask important life and spirituality questions. Questions like, is there a plan for my life? Does God hear my prayers? How can God permit the atrocities that happen in this world? From One Father to Another is a book that prompts all readers, not only fathers, to ponder such questions. It may also help the reader to make sense of their world. Amherstburg author Kevin Robert Jarvis has always been interested in Christian apologetics, but he thought the responses lacked a personal touch. Kevin's studies in theology and pastoral ministry at Assumption University provided him with a foundation to address spirituality questions. Becoming a father gave him a new perspective. Tonight, we'll discuss From One Father to Another and learn more about Kevin Robert Jarvis. Kevin, welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Glad to be here.
This book was really sort of quite interesting because it really does, besides these wonderful questions that you pose, it really does give you pause for thought. And you say that you're writing this from a father's perspective. What is it about being a father that changed you?
I think it was just the fact that the world didn't revolve around me. And it was so easy to kind of get caught up in my own life. I think everyone can, that it just brought deeper questions. It like the love I felt for my children all of a sudden was just, it was a different level that I've never felt before. The responsibility, the burden, dare I say, even like it was just a lot all of a sudden just hit me at once. So yeah, it changed me entirely, really. Yeah.
It's interesting how we actually go out of ourselves when you love somebody usually more than you really love you.
Yes. Yeah.
How does God exist for you?
I think God is a very real presence in our lives. I really do. And I think he exists for me in my children. He exists for me in the people around me. He exists for me in creation. He exists for me in art, in silence. I mean, there's all kinds of ways God exists for me. So he's always kind of touched me through reading other people's books and apologetics and things like that. And then, like I said, that's when I got to this point where I was like, it's very heady, a lot of the apologetics work. So if you're into that, it's awesome. But for me, I was like, I think I could do something personal with the apologetics. Like it was almost like God was telling me, use this experience that you're changing, the way I'm changing you, the insights, and apply them to these questions. And so that's...
Do you ever get mad at him?
All the time. Today. To be honest with you, yes.
What made you mad at him today?
Just had a rough day. To be honest, I just had one of those days. It was like work, got to me. There was just a bunch of things that got to me. My own children suffer in their own ways. I mean, children going to school, whether it's bullying or my daughter sometimes deals with anxiousness. And it's those kind of questions of like, why? Like, so I was mad today. Yeah, it was just a little inner tantrum, I guess. And
how does God, fit into the life that, you or anyone has, when you're a parent to a child? How does God sort of fit in there?
I think it was really seeing that the questions I had for God, why do you allow us to suffer? Why do you hear our prayers? Do you listen to our prayers? How do you deal with our anger? It was like I could easily see myself as a parent going, well, I get that. I get what it's like to love this little being so much, but at the same time, be really angry at what they're doing or what they're not doing. To see them hurting and realizing I can see them hurt and comfort them. May not be able to solve that problem right away, but I can still be there for them. So I don't know. I guess that's, yeah.
Why do you think God lets us suffer and make dreadful mistakes?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's a lot of our own free will. I mean, I get into that quite a bit in the book, but I think we have free will. So like my own children, I see them. I don't like my children to suffer at all. But sometimes I have to admit when they're suffering, it's their own doing. right? Whether they weren't listening to what I was telling them to do, or I warned them about something. Or so a lot of times when we ask God, why do we suffer? We kind of have to look at ourselves too. And I'm not saying for every instance of suffering, but a lot of it, I think, is we have to look back at ourselves. Yeah.
We say that we're made in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are we really?
Yeah, and I think that's, one of those people asking, are we made in God's image? Like God's this, guy in the sky with a beard and 2 arms and legs and walking around. He's just this other man, right? And I think what I was talking about, the chapter in the book, I really talked about when I look at my kids, we're walking down the street one day and a couple came up and said, oh my, your kids look just like you. And then the wife said, and she's so artistic, just like you. And I remember thinking, that's the image God's made us in, is, we're compassionate, we're creative, we're inquisitive, we're all of these things. So when we're made in God's image, I believe it's more of an attribute inside of us, who we are as people, rather than just, look, he doesn't look like us. We don't look like him. It's more of a reflection of his being in us. So
you have some really wonderful experiences with your children, and you use those experiences. Your daughter, Cara, you used an incident with her to answer the question, how can God hear the prayers of billions of people?
Yes. So that was one morning. It was, we were waking up, and my little guy, Luke, I think he was like maybe 4 at the time. And Cara had, or my other friend, Owen, or my son, Owen, had a friend over. And then my daughter woke up, and they were all kind of asking for different things. And the example I used is, before my son even asked, I knew that he had to get a diaper change, because I think he was younger too. I think he was like 2.5. And I knew he needed a diaper change. My other son was asking for chocolate milk. And his friend also wanted to know when he was going home, but I already sent the text. So I looked at it as like, I already knew what my children need, and I was already answering requests that they didn't even ask yet, and I was already doing those things. And I thought to myself, if I'm just this finite one guy, who, by the way, that morning was chaotic anyway, and I'm looking around going, I've managed to do all of this on my own, answer the requests that they actually asked and the ones they didn't even know that they were going to ask. I thought, if I'm just this finite little guy, if God's infinite, if I could do this with just like 3 or 4 kids, is it not possible that an infinite being could do the same thing for all of us? So God could be answering requests that we don't even know we're going to ask yet, or working ahead of us for things that we're going to ask for. That's the way I kind of looked at it.
People often say, well, it's all a matter of faith. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
I never liked the idea of what that kind of entails sometimes. People almost talk like it's just, well, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. And I never really liked that, because it's not, my relationship with God is not just a comforting belief, right? Like, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe. I really believe that faith is just knowing, almost in a deeper way, that there's something more to life, that God is a real being. So faith is living that out, living out a knowing, not just a belief.
How do we know if he's talking to us? How can you tell?
Well, one of the stories I used in the book was my daughter, how do we know what's God's voice, what's our own voice? I think that's just a matter of silence. I really come into silence, and I just know that when God's speaking to me, it's something that's different than a voice of the world or a voice of my ego, or however you want to look at it. It's a tough question. I mean, the way I look at it with my kids is they learn to recognize my voice. It's a language. They just learn to recognize the tone of my voice. And that was something that developed over time. At first, when I talked to my kids, when they were little babies, I'd be speaking the words to them. They didn't know what I was saying. They understood my presence. They understood I was there for them. They didn't know exactly what I was saying. But over time, as they grew, they started to know my voice intimately. And I believe that's what we do with God, is as we grow, it might just be this faint presence. We kind of understand. You get this feeling that God's with you. But as we grow closer to God, his voice becomes very distinct to us. And it's a very personal thing. So it's hard to explain how that is for me, or how it is for you or anyone else. But I believe that's the way it works.
Is it sometimes also, do we sometimes ignore it?
All the time.
I was going to say, do we often ignore it?
I look at my kids, how many times I tell them, please do this. Please don't do that. And 5 minutes later, they're doing exactly what I told them not to do, or they're not doing what I asked them to do. We do the exact same thing as adults all the time, right? God tells us, maybe don't do this, don't make this deal, don't take this job, we just ignore it and do our own thing. And then we look back and we're in a mess and go, what happened? How did I get here?
Do you talk about God with your children?
All the time.
How do they receive that?
They love it, because that's why I wrote this book, is because I realized when I started to talk to them about the way my relationship with them was, they immediately understood, oh, I get it. That's how God is with us. So they made the connection very, very easily. And I think that's what made me go, oh, yeah, I make the connection very easily. Maybe I should write about this, because it's something that my daughter still goes back to my book. She loves my book. She still says, remember you wrote this chapter? And it's just really cool.
How old are your children now?
So Luke is 7, Kara's 11, and Owen is 13.
Wow. So you've got them at critical ages, really.
Yeah.
Do their friends talk about it? Or do they?
Half their friends, some of their friends, they go to a French Catholic school. That doesn't really mean much other than it's there for them. But a lot of our friends and their friends kind of mutual. And so a lot of them are Christians. A lot of them are, some of them aren't. And those are actually the more interesting conversations. I actually love those way more. If I go somewhere and we're with a bunch of people and say, hey, that book you wrote, what was it about? And then that starts a conversation. I love those conversations. And my kids, I find, they're very good at that too. Like my daughter had a friend who literally told her, I know you believe in God. I know your dad wrote that book, but do you really believe he's, God's real? Because I'm afraid to die. And this is an 11-year-old girl saying this to my daughter. My daughter said, well, in my dad's book, he told this story. And I'm laughing going, that's amazing, right? That she's actually seeing that connection.
Do you have conversations with people from other religions about, is it all the same God?
Yeah, that's obviously an ongoing conversation, right? People say, well, why is your God, why is your God all of a sudden, the true God, my God isn't? And I think like anything in the world, you can have views about anything, and some people can be right and some people can be wrong. And the example I used in the book was, I remember this walking downstairs one day and I heard my kids, I just came to the edge of the stairs and I heard them arguing. And I heard my little son going, Dad's an astronaut. And my daughter going, he's not an astronaut. And Luke goes, he's a hockey player. And Owen's like, yeah, he is a hockey player. He goes, yeah, and he's also a professional chef. My daughter's like, he's not a professional chef. And so like I heard little Luke getting all of these kind of facts about me wrong. My older son had all the facts about me correct, and Kara was somewhere in the middle. She wasn't sure, can Dad really cook? No, he orders really well, but he's not a good cook. So I looked at that as like the argument about religion is, what's wrong with saying one of them is right? What's wrong with saying that one of the religions may have the right answers? And that doesn't mean that Luke doesn't have a relationship with me. That doesn't mean that Kara doesn't. They just may have some wrong things about me. And that's kind of the discussion I usually use with people, is that they can't all be true, because then they're kind of mutually exclusive, right? If some people say there's many gods, some people say there's one God, some people say there is no God. So they can't all be true. It's a very difficult topic.
Do you feel that people sort of have different roads to God? That we just sort of go in, in different ways. I mean, I remember when I was a little girl, the nun in my class telling me that we couldn't go to the funeral of one of our little friends in the Anglican church because, well, God is not over there. And so I said, but in the catechism, when it says, where is God? The answer is God is everywhere. So how can he not be over there?
Right.
And it wasn't, till I was much older when you sort of realize that perhaps we just have different ways of getting to God.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying about that conversation with my kids is, they still love me. I still have a relationship with them. Some just maybe had the facts a little wrong. So it's not for me to judge how that works. But I was looking at my 3 children saying, if those were all, If Owen was a religion and Kara was a religion and Luke was a religion, they all love me. But they maybe just have some wrong views about me. And maybe this one has a lot of right views about me and this one's kind of in between. There's still the love there. There's still the relationship there. So as time goes on, yeah.
Have you thought about why some people, lots of people probably, don't believe in God? Is it cultural or growing up?
Evil and suffering.
Evil and suffering.
I would say that's the big one. That's the tough one for me. When I see it, I see it all the time. And there are definitely days where I think, am I a fool? I've really questioned that. I mean, when you really see the amount of evil and suffering in the world some days, it's just like, that can't be right. How can there be a loving God when that happens? And I remember that's actually how the book started. Was I was walking one day and I have these reflections with God. I just walk and kind of think and reflect. And my two friends just got diagnosed with terminal cancer. So one of them was my age, one of them was a little older. Wow. And then another friend of mine lost their young daughter.
Grim.
And I remember walking that day and thinking, no way, God. How could you exist? How could this be real if that happens? Like these two friends were in the prime of their life, this little girl, that does not make sense. And then I swear, it's almost like God put on in my heart. And he said, hold on a second. You brought 3 children into the world. So why did you do it? Why did you bring 3 children into the same world that you're accusing me of bringing you into? And I had to go, wow. So does that mean I'm evil? Because here I am saying to God, you must be evil to bring us into this world and have us suffer like this. But I brought 3 children of my own into the same world. So it's almost like God was saying, well, why did you bring them into the world? And then I had to answer and say, well, I want to love them. I want them to experience my love. I want them to experience things like friendship and all of these things. And I thought maybe God feels the same way.
A friend of mine once said, what makes you think that this is all supposed to be easy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we listen to, my obviously take on as a Christian, if we listen to Jesus, he tells you to pick up your cross and follow you. He doesn't say, hey, come over here. And if you follow me, everything's going to be awesome. You're going to be safe. You're not going to die. Everything's going to be amazing. That is not the message of Christianity. If you're getting that message, you're not reading the right Bible, right? Because that's not what he's talking about.
So there are so many profound things that you write about, but of course you are also a musician. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. But first of all, let's have a listen to your music video. Here it is. It's called Uncertain, and it's directed and filmed by William Hawksworth. Here it is.
I don't want to break us into pieces, but I don't want to hurt with you no more. And I would never leave you empty-handed, and I could never bear to break your heart. If you hang around, then you wear chains with this crown. Someone else is calling you, falling into something new. It's never gonna be that simple. I was always hollow, but you could never follow through. Never have I been so uncertain. Maybe we should find some good old reasons, or maybe we should give each other space. 'Cause if you hang around, then you wear chains with this crown. Someone else is calling you, falling into something new. never follow through. Never have I been uncertain. Well, I just wanna love you again, but maybe I just need to get outside my head. Yeah, then maybe I can show you where I've been. Then maybe you can try to break me in your hands. And you can. Yeah. Someone else is calling you, falling into something new. It's never gonna be that simple. And maybe I was hollow, but you could never follow through. Never have I been uncertain. Well, I just wanna love you again, but maybe I just need to get outside my head. Yeah, then maybe I can show you where I've been. Then maybe you can try to break me in your hands. And you can. You're moving on, you're far too gone, you're never gonna stay for long. It's never gonna be that simple. You never move, you never cry, you never wanna say goodbye. Never have I been uncertain. Yeah, I said yeah, never gonna be that simple. Simple, simple, yeah.
So that was Uncertain, written by my guest, Kevin Robert Jarvis. How much of your life is dedicated to music and performance?
When I'm not at work and I'm not with my children, coaching, things like that, then I'm usually in my studio recording music or writing. So I don't really know a number, but enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, your book, From One Father to Another, have there been any responses from people that have surprised you?
Yeah, quite. I mean, there's been some responses on YouTube from some video series I've done on it. Really good discussions from atheists that had actually changed their mind. And then there was this girl who tagged me in a post and said, this book is everything. Please read it. That was amazing because that was like someone, having a response like that was really cool.
And you're writing another book currently titled, Does the Heart Break Its Promise? God, I love the title.
Mm-hmm.
How far along are you and when do you expect to have it published?
Only a couple chapters in, but writing, sometimes I could write 4 chapters in a day. Sometimes it's 4 chapters in 4 months. So I have no idea right now, honestly. I just keep working on it. And
Do you want to give us just a little synopsis of it?
of the book,
Mm-hmm.
basically look at the world and I see all these people say, follow your heart, go after your dreams. And really, when you look at it, it doesn't seem like the heart keeps its promises. People are still, a lot of times they're suffering. They get exactly what they want and they still want something else. Always want something else. That's kind of a little synopsis. So it's basically saying, if the heart breaks its promise, what does keep its promises? It goes back to God for me.
Yes. And now I've talked about your children and all of these things, but I've not asked about your wife.
Mm-hmm.
How is she in all of this?
She's definitely a big part of the book too, because she's a sounding board for me. She works at the Catholic Church as a youth minister, and she's phenomenal. Support, just someone who I bounce all these ideas off her first, and then if she approves them, they go.
And I meant to ask you, have you always believed in God?
Nope. No, I came probably in my late 20s. I was actually an atheist for quite a while. I used to laugh at people that believe in God, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I had all the arguments to show that it's silly and it's no different than Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. And then something happened. Yeah. God took a hold of me somehow. And
Could you imagine your life without God?
no, I honestly couldn't. I really don't. I don't think I think life, there's a lot of suffering anyway without God. And I think if God wasn't in my life, it would just be very dreary. It would be very, and that's not to be mistaken for someone saying, oh, so you just can't handle life, so you believe in God. No, that's not what that is. I really believe it's a genuine movement of my soul towards God.
And do you think that perhaps when we ask God for stuff, it isn't that he's supposed to create a miracle, but that we're supposed to kind of help him out and take some responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, if my children treated me like a genie all day long, I don't think, if you wake up in the morning and just say, Dad, give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. It's like, I want to give them everything I can. But at the same respect, I'm hoping that they will be in a relationship with me and do some things that will contribute to that. So, yeah.
Well, it's just been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
and
much.
And very best of luck with your book.
Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, that's all for this episode of Scribes and Songsters. I know we would have a lot more to talk about if there was time. Many thanks to our guest, Kevin Robert Jarvis. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Liz Pettipies-Phillips, technical producer and editor Gary Glass, social media manager Michelle Fortier, and consultant Brian Sweet. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now. Scribes and Songsters presents some of the many gifted and entertaining writers and songwriters of Windsor and Essex County. Local publishers and literary events are also featured. I'm your host, Veronique Mandel. Join me, won't you, for Scribes and Songsters, right here on your TV.